what person, real or fictional, has had the most influence on your life, and what have you learned from them?
The most important values in my life are kindness, empathy, and compassion. I work very hard to live those values and kind of live my life by example and kind of be the person I need in the world. And the person I need in the world is kind, compassionate, and empathetic. I don't know if there was a single character or person who really kind of like pointed me in that direction and made that happen. I think it's kind of an amalgam of like watching Star Trek as a kid and watching the original Star Trek and watching this real diverse group of people work together in an environment where they respected each other. And something that was really important for me to see modeled was that these were people who respected each other, who cared about each other, and they were allowed to disagree. In my family, I was never allowed to disagree. And that seeing that you could be valuable and you could be loved and you could be part of something while still occasionally disagreeing was really important for me. The single most important actual human being in my life would have been my great aunt Val. She was my mother's aunt, so she's my great aunt. I just called her Aunt Val, and I spent every weekend at her house when I was a kid. I didn't grow up in a great family. The man who is my dad just chose to be a bully to me instead of a father. And I was not super happy at home, and I didn't feel like kind of safe and relaxed, but I felt all of those things when I was at Aunt Val's house. When I was with Aunt Val, I felt like I was enough. I felt like I was safe. I felt like I was accepted. And knowing what that felt like and having it compared to what I felt like when I wasn't around her, it set in motion this desire to just find people who made me feel the way she made me feel, and to be someone who would make other people feel that same way. So I guess fictionally, it would be the characters of the original Star Trek, probably the characters in the original Star Wars too, just kind of that like way we kind of like work together and do things. But it would definitely be Aunt Val in my actual real life.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so what is an example of a time that you experienced failure, and what advice do you have for overcoming that feeling?
Okay, so this is an extremely relevant question for this specific moment. Last week, I became a New York Times best-selling author.
I saw that. Congratulations.
I cannot believe it. I never thought that would ever happen to me. I had the opportunity to even for that even to become a possibility, all came out of time I spent writing a novel. So like 4 years ago, I started with a blog post, and that blog post turned into, oh, maybe this is going to be like a magazine article. Wait a minute, now this is on its way to being a novella. Oh, it's still going. Now I guess it's a novel. And I got it as far as I could get it. I knew it wasn't done. I don't have formal education in writing. I don't know how to see what I can't see when I'm looking at a manuscript. And I thought, well, I feel like there's enough of a story here. And the beta readers who I showed it to all loved it. All agreed that there was a small piece missing, but nobody could figure out exactly what that was. So I thought, I'm going to show it to my agent, and we'll take it to publishers and hope that there's an editor somewhere who sees the same thing I see and who will help me finish it up. And every single editor we sent it to in the publishing world rejected it. 100% of the editors rejected it. They rejected it so thoroughly, they did not even give us notes. Like, do this and come back. They were just like, no, thank you, with one exception. This guy, David Pomerico, who is now my editor at Moro, he read it, liked it, agreed with me that it needed work, but he couldn't buy it and do the work with me together on it for publishing reasons that aren't interesting. However, he remembered my book, Just a Geek, from 20 years ago, and he wanted me to work on it and annotate it and re-release it. And I did, and that leads to me last week becoming a New York Times bestselling author. When my novel that I had worked real hard on, that's semi-autobiographical, so it has a fair amount of me in it, was just absolutely rejected, I had to make a choice. Am I going to take it personally? Will I feel like I had been taught my whole life by my dad that I was just worthless and that everything I did was terrible. And if anybody liked me, it was because I had somehow fooled them. I had been taught by my mom through her behavior and the environment she put me in that I couldn't really trust anybody. And if someone was kind to me, it was because they wanted something from me. It was never about who I was as a person. With this novel that I had written, I had spent time kind of separating myself as an adult from the environment I grew up in, and I had to relearn a lot of things about myself. The biggest thing was learning that, like, I actually really am enough, and that all of those things that I felt bad about were kind of not about me. They were kind of about other people. So when this came back to me, like, everybody, like, I mean, it could not have been more universally rejected. It is not possible for it to be more universally rejected. I had a choice. Am I going to make it personal and decide that I'm useless, or am I going to choose to just accept that, hey, you know, I enjoyed the process of working on this. I really enjoyed the process of working on it, and it just didn't get published. That doesn't mean I am a failure. It doesn't mean the work is a failure. The work still exists. And I built out of that work something else that I absolutely didn't expect, that I never would have thought to do on my own, that has ended up being something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. Like, I stop and think about it, you know, like, I'm just a guy. I'm a dad, and I'm a husband, and I'm a nerd who likes games and plays arcade games from the 80s and, like, really loves punk rock. Like, that's who I am. And for the rest of my life, I get introduced to someone who's a New York Times bestselling author. That kind of came out of what could be considered a failure. It could absolutely be thought of as a failure, but the thing was, I did not accept it as a failure. I accepted it as a part of the process that just kind of stopped. The success was in telling the story in the first place. The success was in the experience of working on it and rewriting it and exploring the things that I explored while I did it. So when Still Just a Geek, my current book, came around, I had another choice to make. And I made a deliberate choice from the very beginning that I was going to stay neutral on how it was received, that I was going to love and be grateful for and like cherish the experience I had telling the story and bringing it to life and sharing it with people. But I wasn't going to let someone else's definition of success become my definition of success. And I chose to define it on my own terms, which is, there's a thing in the world that I made. And whether it is, like, loved or ignored, is, like, so out of my hands. I actually wrote down on a piece of paper, when you are freaking out before this book comes out, remember, everything that you can do about it, you did, right? Like, everything that I could do, I did in the writing and the rewriting. I can't do anything about it anymore. So in a way, I could think about the results of its, like, reception as having already happened. I just haven't observed the results yet because I can't do anything about it. Like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And just accepting that was this incredible joy and this incredible freedom, and made all this space for me to just be grateful for all of it, which is a really good place to be. It feels so much better than, like, you talk to people who go all the way to the championship in whatever their sport is. And there are some players on the team who, if they don't win that final game, feel like it was all for nothing. And my heart breaks for them, because look at what you did, man. Look at what you did that all those people didn't or couldn't or chose not to do. Just because you didn't win one game doesn't mean you're not amazing. Somebody has to win that game, and it just wasn't you this time. Like, I choose to be in a place where it's the doing that is the reward, and separate the results from my personal sense of success or failure. It took me a lifetime to figure that out. If me saying all of this helps you and your peers kind of like, just because it's a thing we have to learn, right? Eventually we have to learn, and it's hard. It's so hard. Like, we want people to like us. We want to hold up a thing, and we want someone to go, that is so cool. Eventually, and it takes time, and it's okay to want that. It's super okay to want that. But eventually, I got to a place where, for my happiness and like my mental health, I had to allow that sense of accomplishment to originate inside of myself and not be dependent on another person pushing a start button. And if you can get there, it's a really good place to be. But it is also okay to feel disappointed. I don't want to give that impression too. Also, sorry, I'll this is a long answer to this question. It's super okay to be disappointed. It's really okay to be sad. It's okay to feel like just super bummed out about a thing. But that's such a huge difference from being a failure.
Yeah.
Not achieving a thing does not make you a failure. And I just feel like too much of what exists in our culture right now tells us that those things are the same, and they're not.
I really, really like that answer. I actually do a lot of theater. So that feeling of I didn't get the role that I wanted, or I competed at this event and didn't get the score that I wanted. And I also have to remind myself a lot too that it's all subjective. And just because this director didn't like me for this role doesn't mean that I can't play that role, or that I can't sing, or that I can't act. It just means that I, for whatever reason, didn't get it that time. And I say that because I know that that's shared by a lot of young people, especially in theater, who maybe get discouraged at a young age, and then they just stop and they don't come back to it because they didn't get that one role, or they didn't do well at that one event. And it's tough. It's just tough. And that feeling, exactly what you're saying, that disappointment and thinking of yourself as like, I can't do this. Like, I'm not for this.
I know, as an artist, and I'm an artist in a lot of different mediums. The two most public would be acting and writing. It's emotional. It's personal. It's deeply personal. The performances that stay with us, the performances that, if we choose it as a career, define our careers, are extremely personal. It is a real challenge to separate the personal work that I put into this creation from my personal sense of value and worthiness in the world. I think it's an extremely good idea for everyone who wants to pursue acting as a career. I think it's a wonderful idea for every actor to sit in on a casting session. Don't participate in it, just sit in it. Just sit in the back and watch, because what you will see is this parade of magnificent actors, each one absolutely capable of the role. Every now and then someone's just totally wrong, but generally, if casting knows what they're doing, here are 40 people who are all like nanometers different from the other. And one of them just happens to be exactly the right fit. And I was never really taught that. My entire experience as an actor was so wrapped up in my mom's need to be popular and successful, and her need to be for me to be famous so she could be a famous actor's mom. She took it all personally. So I learned that I should take it personally. I wish I had not been taught that, because it was really painful and has had lasting consequences on my life.
I'm sorry, and thank you for sharing that. And I also just want to throw it out there that I'm actually currently reading Still Just a Geek. And
Oh, thank you. Can I ask you a question?
yeah.
Is it relevant at all to your life? And it's really okay if it's not. I remember being in high school, but I know that my time in high school is so different from yours. And I just wonder kind of like what experiences kind of transcend generation. Are you finding it relatable at all? Or is it like an old guy talking about stuff you don't care about?
No, I really do. I love how you're able to reflect on past things you said or past decisions that you've made and talk about how you've learned and grown from that. And I think that concept is still very relevant. And even being in high school, you know, kind of moving on to situations that you may not be proud of. I think that's and kind of come to the realization that yes, like owning up to like, yes, I said I did this, but I'm sorry and I know better now. And like it doesn't excuse that behavior, but I want you to know that that's not the person I am anymore. I
Yeah.
I really like that. I'm really enjoying reading. It's kind of a weird way to put that.
I'm actually really happy to hear that. I think it's one of the, I think a reason men of my generation have a very hard time admitting mistakes and owning bad behavior is we were raised in a world where we weren't allowed to make mistakes. And that's why you see a lot of men of my generation really double down on bad behavior or do that "I'm sorry you were offended" apology. That's like not an apology. It's because a lot of men in my generation were taught that like, you're like, it's somehow shameful or weak or whatever. And I always rejected that. I always thought how, and that's why men of my generation kind of like don't change. It's why it's one of the reasons men of my generation like don't listen to your generation. And it's like, it's frustrating. I am hoping to sort of set an example that we can own our mistakes, atone for our mistakes, and then move forward with the knowledge that we gained that allowed us to change. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does things that they regret. If you're lucky, you don't do them in public. If you're lucky, they're not. I cannot imagine. There's a joke. I'm Generation X. There's a joke with people that are my age about how like that goes something like, we left the house at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, didn't come home until the sun went down. Our parents had no idea where we were, had no idea how to contact us. None of the dumb things we did are preserved forever on the internet. We lived like gods. And I think about that a lot. And I think about like, it's got to be challenging to be a young person in the world today where like, you say a dumb thing and then immediately think, ugh, I wish I hadn't said that. Well, here's your classmate TikToking right next to you and now it's there forever. And it's just like people screw up, you know, and we do things that we regret. And the only way, if we're going to expect people to apologize and be better, we have to be willing to forgive ourselves and we have to be willing to accept sincere apologies. Otherwise, we're just going to get more of that "I'm sorry you were offended" garbage. That doesn't mean anything at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so what book or play or movie or TV show or anything else do you wish you had been introduced to sooner in life?
Okay.
I love people's responses to this question. I ask almost everyone this because
it's a great question. And I'm going to talk through my thought process as we get there, because this is what I'm thinking. There are things, music especially,
yes,
that I liked as a teenager. But I listen to it now and I realize that I didn't understand it. I didn't know what they were saying because I hadn't lived enough to have experiences that were relatable. I just thought, I really like this music. I like its vibe. I like its energy. And it wasn't until I was an adult and was like raising my own kids that I started to realize gosh, this artist is saying something that really speaks to me, that like lands on me in a really important way. And there are bands from the 90s, like, I mean, the Foo Fighters are a really big band that all of my friends are crazy about, that to me was like the band that Dave Grohl started after Nirvana. So like in my head, the Foo Fighters, who have become one of my absolute favorite bands, were like somehow like in the shadow of Nirvana, which is unfair to all of them, but just the way I thought when I was 20. And I'm really glad that I am listening to all of it now. I've been listening to Billie Eilish's new record, and I am blown away. I am absolutely knocked off my feet by her voice, not her physical voice, her existential, literary, lyrical voice. I am blown away by what she says and how she says it, and the level of wisdom and like security and knowledge she has, and she's so young. Like it just, I'm in awe. I am in awe of her. I mean, those were things that were really, those are, I'm trying to, so the reason I mention these things is like, I'm ready for these things when I get them, right? So there's stuff that's been, that I wish I had read much earlier, just because I wish it had been in my life longer, but I don't know if I would have been ready for it. I don't know if I would have been like fertile ground for those seeds to grow in the way that they did when I got older. So when I was in my teens, I read a science book called Hyperspace, and that was kind of my introduction to like multidimensional theory, and that kind of leads to thinking about perhaps our existence living inside of a simulation and other kind of existential questions where philosophy and science kind of overlap. And that was extremely influential on me, because it let me see causality very differently than I saw it before. It got me out of kind of being the main character in my life, and it opened me up to the reality that every single person I brush up against in my life, whether they are a person I'm meaningfully interacting with, or if they are a person who is like an NPC in my story, every single one of those persons has a life as rich and full and complicated as mine. That every single human being on this planet has that complexity to their existence is difficult to wrap my head around. It started me thinking about how nobody knows what you're going through, and how everybody's going through something and you just never know. That started me down this path toward being as patient and compassionate and as empathetic as I can possibly be. So had I run into that, I mean, I don't know if I could run into it earlier. I picked it up when I was like 16 or 17. But I don't think I got to all that other stuff and understood the really important part of it until I was like in my 30s. There is also an album by Pink Floyd called The Wall. It tells the story of a rock star who is at just the height of his career, and his entire world is falling down around him. He feels alienated from everybody. His marriage has fallen apart. He has a toxic relationship with his fans. He is in just a spiral of addiction and self-destructive behavior. And it all comes out of how much he was hurt by his parents, his father not being there and his mother kind of smothering him. And I could really relate to that as a kid. I could really, really relate to that. That album came out in 1980 when I was 8. I first heard it in its entirety in maybe 1987, 1986, 1987, something like that. And it was the first time in my life I felt like a work of art had been created specifically for me, just specifically for me. And because I knew, like, my story was different, but it was similar enough that I saw a lot of myself reflected in the story of the album. it was one of those things that made me feel just like, okay, I'm not the only person in the world who is experiencing this. And I guess I knew that if a group of people had worked hard enough to put together an album that told this story, there were other people who shared my story, and someday I was going to find them. And somehow it was going to be kind of like, it would be like a Battlestar Galactica finally getting to Earth, like, oh, I finally got there. Okay, that's what that was like.
I love the geeky references. I'm a total Star Trek, Battlestar, Firefly, Star Wars, Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
And thank you for sharing that. And okay, that leads us into the last question.
Okay.
Which is, what advice do you wish you had been given when you were struggling the most?
I've struggled in a lot of different ways. My wife and I struggled financially when we were raising our kids. And that was really, really difficult. We struggled when we were trying to be a family because her ex-husband was just vindictive and kept taking us to court and kept weaponizing our kids. And it was really hard on all of us. I've struggled with mental health. I have depression, anxiety, and PTSD. I don't drink anymore, but I struggled with alcohol abuse for like at least a decade, probably a little bit longer. The thing that every one of those has in common, every one of those struggles has in common, is I just felt like I was totally alone and that all of this stuff was somehow my fault. And the advice that if I could go back and talk to myself, I know that I have to go through all these things. There's nothing I can do about it, right? Like those things, it's the thing I was talking about earlier. They already happened. And those things were going to happen from the moment I was born. It just hadn't gotten there yet. What I think would have made all of that easier, not easy, it was never going to be easy, but what would have made it easier is if I had known in my heart that I was enough, that I had value in this world as a son and as a husband and as a father, and also just as a person. It would have made all of that less painful, because in addition to struggling to have a family, struggling to be seen by my parents, struggling to pay my bills, and before I got diagnosed and treated for my mental illness, struggling with undiagnosed mental illness. Through all of that, I also had to struggle with feeling like I was worth fighting for. And I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel that way about myself. I was worth fighting for because I matter to my wife and my kids. But I wish that I had felt like I was worth it. And the way that I actually got there, John Green is one of my heroes. And in a recent Vlogbrothers video, he talked about using rage and resentment as fuel to get him through hard times. And I really related to that. I really understood it in a way that I wish I didn't. There's a moment where rage and resentment is like, it's incredible fuel. It's very powerful. It burns so hot and it burns so intensely, and its power output is unimaginable, but it leaves behind the worst toxic waste that is eventually going to absolutely corrode and destroy the entire system. When I ran out and all I had left was that toxic waste, I needed somebody to just come in and say, you've done everything that you can do. and you need some help. And that person was my wife getting me help for my mental illness. And from that choice and that love for me, everything else came together. And I have an amazing life now. I have the best life. I have a better life than I ever imagined I would possibly have. I am exceeding anything I ever dreamed of. I'm getting to do things that I never, ever would have imagined I ever would have gotten to do. And I'm just so happy all the time. I just feel so unburdened, and I feel like I'm doing something meaningful with my life. And I just find gratitude and joy in everything all the time. And that never would have happened without that moment from my wife. I often talk about how I wish that had happened sooner. And I do. But it happened when it needed to happen because I was ready for it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I lied. I have 2 more quick questions for you, but they're quick.
That's super fine. I don't have anywhere to be, so we can take. I am really happy to give you my time. It's not a problem at all.
Thank you so much. So the first one is, what is your favorite flavor of Girl Scout cookie? There is a right. Well, there's not a right answer. There is a wrong answer.
When I was a kid, I was all about Samoas. I felt like Samoas were like. I kind of felt like I'm getting a lot of cookie here. I'm getting like a lot of different kinds of cookie in the Samoa. And I was like, this is really, these are great. Then for a long, and then for a long time, I really loved frozen Thin Mints. The last couple of Girl Scout cookie seasons, and my dealer lives a couple of blocks away from me, by the way. The ones that I have been crazy about that I can't get enough of are the Do-si-dos. I love that cookie. I love the peanut butter. I love the like softness of the pillow top and the like biscuit underneath it. Like, I mean, it is such a delightful, it just ticks a lot of boxes. But honestly, I kind of like all of them. And I live in Southern California, so we get them from kind of like the original bakery, which is really fun and cool.
Yeah, we actually have 2 different bakers. So it sounds like you guys use the same bakery that I sell from, which is called Samoa's and not Caramel Delights, and has dark chocolate Thin Mints, which are vegan instead of the milk chocolate ones. So, but yeah, no, Do-si-dos are very underrated, especially if you have a glass of milk. Dunk them in a glass of milk.
They're I'm sorry, I'm just watching. 2 crows just came into my patio and did a really exciting kind of acrobatic dance. I think they must be courting. I'm sorry, that was just a really cool. I wish you could have seen that. There's a flavor I'm forgetting. What's the flavor I'm forgetting? There's a sandwich cookie. What's the sandwich cookie? Is there a sandwich cookie?
Sandwich cookie.
Did I make that up? It's been a while and I'm forgetting. I feel like isn't there like a Girl Scout cookie that's kind of like an Oreo, but it's not chocolate? Am I making that up?
That we used to sell something like that. My mom's like, she probably know better than I do. What was that one called? The vanilla one? Do you know what I'm talking about? No. Like the vanilla cookies with vanilla cream? There was a lemon Oreo one. Yes. Okay. There was a lemon Oreo one at some point. I think I know. Okay. Wasn't a vanilla one?
All right. It's one of those weird things where I feel like, did I actually eat this or did I dream it? And it was just so vivid. Like, is it Berenstain Bears or Berenstein Bears? Like, I'm very.
Definitely had a lemon sandwich Oreo type cookie.
Okay, so it must be that.
At some point. And then it was the Savannah Smiles, which were the like lemon shortbread and powdered sugar, and now it's the Lemon Ups. So yes, that was history.
Yes. Do you have a favorite? Are you allowed to have a favorite as a member of the scouting organization, or is it one of those things where you're like, that's like, don't ask, which kid is your favorite? Is it like
no,
that?
I definitely have favorites. I have, I definitely have favorites. My favorites are tagalongs and Samoas. I also really like the do-si-dos. That's also one of my favorites. I
Yeah,
will tell you, I have the opinion that Thin Mints are overrated though. And
I think they are overrated. I agree with you.
very overrated. I will say, if you have a Thin Mint brownie though, you just take like a sleeve of Thin Mints and crush them up and put them in your favorite brownie mix and make the brownie, and that is really good. But
I was going to say, I think the way Thin Mints really, or I feel like people really miss the whole point of Thin Mints is you smash them up and put them in other things. You don't eat them by themselves. You're totally missing the point, man. Like they make a pie crust that's amazing, or like you can put them into ice cream or like milkshakes. Like, yeah, I feel like Thin Mints are a component. They're not a final thing.
I completely agree. It's true because they crumble so well. Like,
Oh, it's beautiful. It's like they were designed for that. It's so weird. I just don't understand. It's like, does anyone go and just grab? I'm sure there's someone's gonna be like, yes, of course I grab marshmallows and just eat them. But I'm like, no, you don't. You do things with them. They're part of something.
I would eat marshmallows by the handful. I think that sounds great. So
You would really get along with my wife. I feel like that's a thing she would do.
Absolutely. And my last question for you is, first of all, again, thank you so much. I really cannot thank you enough. Like I said before, I'm a huge nerd, so this
That's
is
awesome. It's a real pleasure.
and just thank you. And the last thing is there anybody that you can recommend that you think would be a good fit for me to interview for this project that you might be able to put me in touch with?
I think Felicia Day would be an incredible person for you to talk to. I know that she would, if I asked her. Who else immediately springs to mind? That's in media, who I think would be a great interview, who I know well enough that I could be like, hey, would you do this? Yeah, I think Felicia. I think Felicia is the best match I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe if I went into my office and like shuffled papers or whatever, there might be another person, but Felicia's like my sister, so I could definitely ask her if she would do it. And I wonder if LeVar Burton would talk to you. I bet he would. LeVar really likes doing things for kids. And LeVar's daughter, Mika's amazing. She's incredible. We co-hosted Star Trek Day together last year, and she's great. She would be just a slightly older woman, but like younger than me, but like a woman to speak to other women. I feel like that's who I'm trying to connect you to. I'm trying to connect you to like who are amazing, badass women I know. And it's just like, oh, all of them that will talk to you. I'm going to pitch you to Felicia.
Thank you so much. I just have to tell you the story. I'm so sorry. You said LeVar Burton, and now I got to tell you the story. That would be amazing. My parents are laughing at me because they know they're over here. Oh my god, they're laughing at me because they know I'm about to tell us. But so the very first, so I've gone to Super 4 to SuperCon every year since I was 12, and the very first SuperCon that I went to was in 2017. I was 12. It's really important to note here that I was 12 years old at the time.
Okay.
Yes. So I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'd actually just finished it, and we were actually, and LeVar Burton was going to be at said SuperCon. So months in advance, I was like prepping what I was going to say. I was so excited. I was so nervous. I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to say. And my mom would be like, you're going to get maybe 30 seconds, right? Like, this is not going to be a 10-minute conversation. I was like, it doesn't matter. So, we were on vacation for like 2 weeks prior, and I was like, the whole time I was so focused on like this 10-second interaction. So we get to the SuperCon. Well, I know, see your face, you know where this is going. So
I've been LeVar Burton in this story so many times. Keep going. I love it.
First of all, I was the youngest person in line to see him by like at least 3 decades.
Hey. Yeah, I know.
So he says, "What's your name?" And I just went, no words. I just couldn't make anything come out. my mom goes, I think she's a little Star Trek. And he goes, you think? And proceeds to get worse because then he says, well, what do you do? And the first word I managed to get out was, what? And my mom's like, and he clarifies, he's like, are you a student? Do you go to bars? Do you drink? Like, what do you do? And I was like, I'm 12.
My computer just froze.
Oh no.
Oh, get back. Okay, no, it's cool, it's cool. So he says, are you a student?
He says, are you a student? Or do you go to bars? Do you drink? And all I said was, I'm 12.
He says this clearly knowing you're 12, right?
Well, the next thing, oh no, you're frozen again. No, internet. Okay. Well, the next thing he says, all right, and then he just signs it and goes on. So that was my interaction with him. I should have been embarrassed, but I really wasn't. I was just on cloud nine. I was like, oh my God, he's like a human being and he's here and I met him.
I love that.
I think it's a funny story now though. So it was
I have been LeVar Burton in that story so many times. And honestly, when I get to be LeVar Burton in that story, it's such a gift. It's such a privilege to just.
I'm glad you think so.
For real, Linda, to have just like a moment where you just when that happens to me, I just feel like I feel cool and I feel special. And the thing is, I remember being you in that story. Like, I am turning 50 and I was you in that story at Star Trek Mission Chicago when I went over to talk to Anson Mount. I've interviewed Anson Mount. I have worked with Anson Mount, but never in person. So when I went up to talk to him, I was just like, in my head, it's just, don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Don't say something stupid. Don't be. And I basically got up there and I was like, duh. I mean, just it happens. So when I am the other side of that, I know what you're going through. And I want to make you just feel good and like safe and like it's okay. And I know LeVar is the same way. Like however 12-year-old you needed to express herself, right? Sometimes, but this thing happens to me with like regularly grown women, like absolutely is the same age as your mom, will come up to me and be like, there's a 12-year-old girl inside of me right now, and I'm having a really hard time keeping it under control. And I always say, let her out, let her go. Like, let's talk to her. Let's do this. Because when I got to meet an actor from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I was like, listen, I know that people tell you how much it means to you, so I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just going to tell you I'm one of those people, right? And I was like, I can't say anything else. And she was like, you can say whatever you want. And I just was like, ah! And it was such a joyful moment, right? So like, I view this thing that LeVar and I are part of, that SuperCon is part of, that you are part of. It's this gorgeous continuum. It is this never-ending sharing of joy and excitement and enthusiasm and community, and in a safe environment where we all get to just be enthusiastic, right? It is such a gift. It is such an incredible privilege to be in this. And when you tell your story, it reminds me how lucky I am to be part of it, and it gets me hyped to go do it again. So like, that is a great story, and I love that you shared it with me.
It is a great story. I think that's my most starstruck story from conventions or meeting Star Trek actors, but I will say it has led to that was the very first time I ever met anyone who worked in Star Trek. So ever since then, every time that like gets posted for SuperCon or I do something like this, the last thing my dad said to me before I was like, oh, Wil Wheaton's in the waiting room. And I went to go press enter. My dad's like, what's your name?
I will tell you very briefly. I'm going to tell you just really briefly. I'll keep it super, super short. There's an 80s hardcore punk band called Black Flag, and I love them. I love them so much. I have a black flag tattoo on the back of my neck. Like and their lead singer and primary lyricist for the part of their existence that I love is a man named Henry Rollins. And he's a little bit older than I am. He's a really well-known, in my community, well-known writer. And just a beautiful, one of the reasons I am a writer is because I like reading his work so much. When I was in drama school, I used his poetry as source material for monologues while I was learning. I have this intense, intimate connection to his art, right? So Henry is a voice actor. I am a voice actor. We have worked together on the same show. And I managed to like really keep it together when we were working together. One time, I absolutely did not keep it together at all. I was at a studio in Burbank in the San Fernando Valley. And it's a place I go to a lot to record audiobooks. And I was narrating an audiobook. I don't remember which one it was. And I was done for the day. And I started to walk out. Right by the door where you leave, there's a long table against the wall, and it's where we go and sit on our breaks and eat our lunch and whatever. And there's a person sitting at that table reading something off of an iPad. And as I walk by, I notice that this person has a black flag tattoo on the base of their neck. And I said, "Oh my God, I love that you have a black flag tattoo. Black Flag is my favorite band of all time." And the guy turns around and it's Henry Rollins.
My dad just said, "No way, that's awesome."
And I go, a thing in my brain broke. Like a really important thing that connects where thoughts form to where thoughts come out broke.
Oh, I'm also
right?
with that.
It was like someone took both halves of my brain and just spun them around, right? And I said, I'm going to do to you what people do to me, and I'm sorry. I just want you to know how much your work means to me. And I read your work when I was in drama school, and I talked a little bit, and then I was kind of like this voice in my head, "You're babbling." So I was like, "Oh my God, I'm babbling. I'm going to stop. Okay, thank you." That probably lasted for about 60 seconds. I was shaking his hand the entire time. I never stopped shaking his hand. I realized that after I'd been doing it for close to a minute, and I turned to leave. And the door's like right there. And I push the door, and the door doesn't open. So I'm like, and I pull on the door, and the door doesn't move. I have been in this studio 1,000 times and forgot that you have to push a button to unlock the door. So the people who work at this studio, I've seen them for years. They know me, I know them. One of them comes walking over, and she looks at me and she goes, "You got to push the..." She knows exactly what's going on. And I was like, okay. And I basically fall out and ran across the parking lot to get away. I saw Henry a year later. We worked together on a show called Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters. I was a regular on that show. And Henry was in as a guest star. In the world of voice acting, there's a little bit of a hierarchy. And as it generally works, the actors who are regulars get to choose where in the room we want to stand to work. And then the guest actors kind of take what's left. That's just the way that it always works. When I worked on Legion of Superheroes, I took what was available to me. When I worked on Teen Titans, I got to pick. Like, it just kind of goes like that. So I go in, and somebody's stuff is on my music stand in front of my microphone. And I'm like, just looking around. I don't care. It's not a thing where I'm like, "Oh, you're in my space." So I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'm going to move." And here comes the person whose stuff it is. It's Henry Rollins. And this is after. And I'm like, "Please don't remember. Please don't remember. Please don't remember." He doesn't remember.
Okay.
Thank God he doesn't remember. He says, am I at your music stand? And I said, yeah, but you're Henry Rollins, I'll move. And he goes, no, buddy, you're a regular. Like, I know my place.
Aw.
And I was like, oh, okay. I need to walk out of this room now. Those are my two experiences with Henry Rollins.
Well,
So, like,
so thank you. My dad said so cool. He's smiling. He thinks it's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I will. Well, just really quick, I promise I'll let you go soon. I feel so bad. Thank you so much for being here. So it was announced over the summer that for last summer that Kate Mulgrew would be appearing at SuperCon, and when I tell you, I cried when I received this information.
Oh, that's
I was
great.
so excited. Janeway has been my hero since I was a kid,
Yeah.
and then she ended up canceling, and it was a whole thing. But it was for like 3 months between the time it was announced and the time that she was announced she wouldn't be appearing. My parents would at random times throughout the day or like randomly come into my room or like call me and be like, hi, I'm Kate Mulgrew, what's your name? And I was like, hi, my name is Linda, it's nice to meet you. So I had the automatic so it was an automatic response. So now I'm ready. I'm good to go. She ever says that, I'm like, that only gets me through the first like 10 seconds though. The rest is on me. Like
that's all right. That's all you need. That's all you need. When you're like kind of out on your own and you have to like do all these really crummy adult responsibilities because like all of a sudden you're the adult who has to do them, you'll figure out the hard part is just starting. Right? It's just like, I don't wanna, like that never goes away, by the way. I don't wanna do this. But just starting it and all of a sudden, oh, I've got momentum and I can go. I promise you, you'll get through that and everything else is gonna be there for you. And if I am at a con and Kate is at a con and you are at a con, you have my permission to come get me and I will introduce you to Kate. I know Kate. Kate is a coworker of mine. I know her and I will introduce you to her, which will maybe put you in a slightly more at ease place where you can like, you've already got your first thing lined up, you can work on your second thing. So if those circumstances ever align, I'm very happy to make that introduction for you. It would be, I would think it would actually be really cool to do that.
Would be amazing if that ever happens. So please come to Florida SuperCon as soon as you can. That'd be amazing. Thank you so much. Also, we just watched last night the episode of a Ready Room with you and Kate Mulgrew, and that was amazing.
So fun talking to her.
Yeah, it was so
yeah,
cool.
it's just she's awesome. I love her on Prodigy so much.
Oh my god!
I am just I am obsessed with Star Trek Prodigy. I think it's wonderful. I love that it is how an entire generation of children is coming to the Star Trek universe. We're gonna raise an entire generation of like thoughtful, kind, science motivated humanists because they grew up with Star Trek. Like that's just, I'm really excited about that.
It's so cool. It's really, really good. And Janeway as a hologram is just amazing. And I'm obsessed with it. Okay. Thank you so much. I really
You are so welcome.
For your time and for your willingness to be here. And this is just amazing. So thank you.
You are absolutely welcome. And I just want you to know, just as a person on the other side of the country, I am speaking as a dad, okay? I am incredibly proud of all the work you have done to be where you are right now in this moment. Like you have made choices to do hard things and you have made choices to like, really, I'm sure, persevere through things when you're just like, I don't wanna. And that's really cool. And I hope that you will have space in your life at some point to really feel how proud you deserve to feel of that. That's a cool thing. You did a thing that not everybody does. And I want you to know that I see that and I recognize it. And I am thrilled to be part of your story.
Thank you so much. Just thank you. I wish I had more words or more sophisticated words.
It's all right. It's okay. Save them for Kate.